following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko, the weak link at the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I'm here to talk to the host of the show, the esteemed Michael Duca. Nice announcing, Ralphie boy. Nice announcing. How are you? And that was take two.
We
should have heard
every last one of us has been there.
Well, but every last one of us doesn't live there. And big difference, Michael. You doing all right?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Good. We're into Hot Stove League, sadly enough. A little Giants news and a big surprise. We talked about this a while back, the possibility of Righetti no longer being there eventually. I thought he had a lifetime pass. Dave Righetti.
Well, I think he does if he doesn't mind where he works. I think the Giants, I don't think they would ever part ways with him. But if, there's a scenario out there that suggests that Dusty Baker may roll the dice once more with a team, maybe maybe a Western team, and Rags might be an accompaniment there. Worse things could happen to a team than starting out with a couple of winners like that on the bench. But for now, he is kind of Dick Tidrow number 2 in the organization. Another guy who reports directly to the general manager and whose function is to evaluate pitching.
And Dick Tidrow, the late Dick Tidrow, they called him Dirt. He is and will always be missed tremendously in the Giants organization. And if Rags can replace him and do it with a smile on his face, did he agree to this? I mean, was this something they discussed?
Yes. First of all, I know that some of us visit and some of us live there, but I can handle having my name mispronounced, but I can't handle having my friend Dick Tidrow put in the ground prematurely. Dick is still alive and well and with us.
Oh, who am I thinking of then?
I'm not sure who you're thinking of, but I know that Dick Tidrow went to Chabot College, and he's only 4 years older than me, so please don't hustle us.
No, and younger than me, so I am apologetic. I really, I'm sorry. There was I'll think of it. Giants had a minor league kind of a Dick Tidrow kind of guy, and I thought it was him who passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. And
there was Ted Eulander.
No. Ted Eulander was a Washington senator. I had a baseball card of him as a Washington senator.
He indeed was, but he was also he lived on a ranch in Nebraska, and he was a minor league poobah for the Giants for many, many years. Tidrow never played for the Giants. He played for the Indians and the Yankees and the White Sox and the Cubs and the Mets, but he never played for the Giants.
Well, I'm glad, Michael, that he is still with us. How about that?
He is.
Where would Dusty manage next? You mentioned something on the West Coast. Is that rumor?
No, it's pure speculation on my part. And beyond that, asking me where somebody would manage next is an exercise in silliness, because if you had asked me at the close of the regular season, were the managers of the Yankees and the Nationals both going to get fired for getting their teams very close to the World Series, I would have said not a chance. So I'm not very good at predicting the power game, which is, everybody talks about the power game in baseball being the increase in home runs. So the real power game is trying to figure out who has to suck up to which general manager to keep their job.
Right, and even the way they fired Dusty in Washington was absolutely abhorrible. They kept him on the hook for 2 or 3 days, didn't call him or anything in Washington. They didn't have the balls to just look him in the eye, face to face, call him in. It didn't work out. We don't, this, that, and the other thing. They wait till he gets back to California, call him on the phone, and tell him he's no longer manager. What kind of
and it's even worse than that, because Mike Rizzo, who was the guy who fired him, told him in July and again in August that they were on the same page and that an extension was coming and it was just a matter of time and please be patient. So, my feeling on this, there are some guys that I can talk about dispassionately and some I can't. Dusty is a close personal friend. And as a matter of fact, I like to talk about the breadth of my experience with Dusty by telling you that within 30 seconds of the announcement in 2008 that Barack Obama had been elected president, I was on the phone talking to Dusty about what it meant. It's, I can't feel bad that he's not going to be in Washington. I can feel bad about how they treated him. I can feel bad about the fact that he's not currently employed. But, he deserves so much better than that organization. I mean, they have a lengthy history of navel gazing there.
Well, but if you're going to pick a guy to do it to, why Dusty Baker, for crying out loud? He's a beloved guy in baseball. He just
well. Remember,
a wealth of smiles and a wealth of love. That's what
and
what
positivity,
he's about.
positivity, which is what he brings to so many of these organizations that they're not used to having. I mean, that's how he turned the Cubs around. That's how he turned the Reds around. He walks in the door and it's like an instantaneous culture change.
Right.
But, there's just, you have to remember how he got there. How he got there tells you a whole lot about how he left there. Remember, they announced that they had hired Bud Black, only it turned out that Bud Black decided he didn't want to work for, let's see, what non-loaded word can I use here? For insufficient wages.
Okay.
And, and then, lo and behold, they hired Dusty the next day. I don't know how hard a team thinks about things like this, but that sounds like more of a reaction than a plan B to me.
Right. If you can't think about it for a week, bring some people in, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah.
So there's all that, and the interesting thing to me about the shakeup the Giants have had, and it may not be done. There are guys out there like Phil Nevin and Ron Wotus and Hensley Mullins who are kind of twisting in the wind, although not in the worst possible way, because they're all being considered for managerial openings at various levels in other organizations. But that's kind of an annual festival for Rod Wotus. I think he's been considered for managerial openings in other organizations for about 15 years now in a row.
He's an incredibly articulate, communicative guy, and I don't understand why he's bench coached to 3 champions in a row, championships in a row. I don't understand why he never got a shot somewhere. That's just
I can't answer that. All I can say, because I've talked to Ronnie a lot. I've talked to him about this subject a lot, and he chooses to take the high road on it and just basically says it hasn't been the right fit yet. And in that sense, I'm lucky that nobody has asked me to come into the wrong fit.
Oh, that's a good positive attitude, indeed. And he doesn't have the worst job in the world, a comparatively pressure-free job compared to the manager who takes all the heat all the time.
Or the third base coach. If you followed Tim Flannery's Facebook and Twitter feed for the last few days, he was deeply, deeply upset at how things went down in San Francisco. He basically said, I have nothing but love for anybody who has the courage to try coaching third base. It may be the worst job in the world. And apparently winning 3 championships in 5 years is not enough to keep your job. Well, now somebody else gets to take all the crap.
Right.
And my feeling on all of this is that there is so much loyalty between Brian Sabean and Bruce Bochy that they decided, rather than shorten his contract by 2 years and go out and look for another manager, that they would basically let him stay, but the cost of staying is pretty much his entire coaching staff, which is really interesting. You don't see this very often.
With his consent in any way?
I have no way of answering that. My suspicion is that it's with his grudging consent, as in he didn't have a choice on the matter. You and I have talked about this before. I think this is coming from way farther uphill than Bruce Bochy. I think it's coming from farther uphill than Bobby Evans. I think it's coming from farther uphill than Brian Sabean.
Larry Baer.
I think it's coming from farther uphill than Larry Baer, personally.
But you put the thing in my head that Giants ownership, and there are so many owners. It's like a board of directors.
Yes, there's about 15. Yeah.
15, okay. That they may not be thrilled with Larry Baer. And remember what a horrible year this was.
I'm not going to say
that the Dodgers won too. That's never. But that only happens once every 29 years.
Well, first of all, as I told people, you could be happy for the Dodgers because their drought was longer than any that the Giants have ever suffered.
That's what
Giants'
I was
longest drought without a pennant was 27 years. And the second thing is, if I told you that management wasn't happy with Larry, I misspoke myself. What I meant to say and what I thought I had said was that I think that the ownership group wants change. And they're going to leave it to Larry what that change will be. If it's a change in the on-field staff, that's fine. If he doesn't want to change the on-field staff, then management may make a change in the managing general partner. But that's
so maybe that's his move to maybe firing the coaching staff is his move to appease.
To placate, I think, yeah. I mean, I think, it's not so much that the Giants didn't win this year, and it's not so much that the Dodgers did win this year. It's the knowledge that, when the Dodgers went out and remodeled Dodger Stadium, when they renovated the clubhouses, they built a whole brand new clubhouse for the home team. And the old Dodger clubhouse now has 21 cubicles in it with baseball analysts doing nothing but grinding numbers day in and day out.
You mentioned that, yes.
And that's approximately 19 more than the Giants had on staff. So you're going to, I think you're going to see that whether we like it or not, and whether it lasts or not, this is the direction things are going. And you're either going to go the direction things are going, or you're going to be the obstacle in the river that they put a red light on top of so the boats that are passing by don't run into you.
Right. Gotcha.
So,
and the Giants are not changing along those lines fast enough to satisfy.
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that. What we know is that there's a number of guys who are not necessarily analytical guys who are being moved, quote unquote, upstairs or laterally, or however you want to look at this, into positions where they are going to be instructing at a minor league level and or working on getting, analyzing players from other teams. I mean, if you look at the teams that are in the World Series right now, you've got an Astros team that was built from the ground up with analytics. Some say maybe stolen analytics, but that's a whole different issue.
Right.
But that they were built from the ground up with analytics, and you don't have to have Donald Trump's memory to recall that Sports Illustrated put them on the cover 3 years ago in spring training and said the 2017 World Series champion Houston Astros. You could see this coming. The Dodgers are a hybrid. They're partially built with analytics. They're partially built from within their own farm system. But the analytics that they are using there are, to anybody else, to an outside organization, they're almost irritating. I mean, look at what they've gotten this year. They've gotten more out of Rich Hill than you have any right to expect. They've gotten more out of Brandon Morrow than you have any right to expect. They've picked up Charlie Culberson and gotten more out of him than anything in his background suggests was there. Ditto Justin Turner. Ditto Chris Taylor. Ditto Forsythe. And all of this comes out of analytics. I mean, you look at every one of these guys, they go out, they gamble on them, and they hit. And who's the last one they did it to? Geez, did anybody think that Yu Darvish was going to be a great pickup for them? This is a guy who had lost his last six
The guy
starts.
from Texas, right.
Yeah.
That was a shock. Sometimes, though, a change of scenery with players, a pitching coach with a new delivery, a new grip, this, that, and the other, that's always a factor. Plus, pitching, you cannot tell from year to year. Especially relief pitching, it's just very difficult to predict pitching.
It is. It's very. I've always thought that there were two industries that were completely upside down in their job structures. One of them is education. The less you have to teach, the more you need to know about teaching. So you need an advanced degree to teach kindergarten, but you don't need to have ever taken an education class at all to teach college, which seems backwards to me. And to me, the hardest job in baseball is area scout. How the hell can you look at a 15-year-old kid and say, I'm going to follow him for 2 years and I'm going to project him to be a major leaguer at age 23?
Right.
The easiest job in the world is being a major league scout. I could do it. And the reason I say I could do it is that I've had major league scouts tell me I could do it. Conversations that we've had before the game. It is not uncommon. I mean, a good major league scout is a listener. And he comes into a stadium, and I have many, many friends among the major league scouts, come in, they see me sitting there, they come over and sit down, and they drain me. They ask me, what have you seen? Who do you like? Who's going good? Who's not? How's this guy handling the breaking pitch? And they just...
You watch every pitch?
Well, but they acknowledge the simple fact that there's going to be some people in every city who are paying attention to their guys, their own guys. Right? It's kind of like in 1993 when the Giants acquired Barry Bonds, and for the first month I just sat there slack-jawed watching him with two things going on. The first thing was he never had good Aprils until 1993, and then he had the greatest April of his career. And the second thing was
he made that impression. First impressions mean a lot, don't they?
Well, they do. And the other thing was I had no idea how good this guy was because I'd seen him in 3-game bursts.
Right.
And you see a guy once a year for 2 or 3 games, or maybe twice a year for 2 or 3 games, 3 months apart. You don't know anything about his game. You don't know anything about his game. But if you watch him day in and day out, all of a sudden you realize, yeah, the guy's got a completely weak-ass arm, but he's got the quickest release I've ever seen in the outfield, and he compensates for it. And here's a player who may be the best player of his generation who understands what his weakness is and has worked on it, rather than concentrating on his strengths and trying to make them even more so to allow you to ignore his weakness. He actually worked on his weakness. And you don't know that if you don't see a guy day in and day out. You can't talk about somebody's work ethic. And there are few things more important to a major league scout than knowing a guy's work ethic, knowing his makeup. Makeup is 50% of who gets drafted and 50% of who makes it to the major leagues. With the caveat that there's so much money now in the amateur draft that if you give first or second round money to somebody, he's going to make it to the major leagues come hell or high water. You have so much money invested in him, you're going to make sure he can't play for you before you let him go.
Right. Would you speak to Bobby Bonds, his dad? As far as his tools go, were they equal to Barry? Just his tools, not how his demeanor.
I think Bobby was faster. I think Barry was a better base runner. And if you listen to Giants broadcast, Mike Krukow has explained many, many times the difference between being a great base runner and being a base stealer. Bobby was a base stealer. Barry stole bases, but he was a great base runner. He knew when he could go first to third. He frequently was a crappy base runner going home to first. He rarely burst out of the box, and I wish he had. If he had burst out of the box, I think he would have been an even greater offensive threat than he was. And truth be told, where did he finish his career? 2,980 hits, something like that.
Wow.
I'm looking right now. Give me 1 second, and I will have this called up. 2,935 hits. So he's 65 hits shy of
3,000.
Shy of the 3,000, which was the one goal that he wanted to reach and didn't. And I have to believe, Ralph, that over the course of 22 years, there were 65 balls that he didn't run out that he could have been safe and wasn't.
Right, with his speed, yeah.
Well, and with his tendency to loaf to first base on ground balls that he assumes were going to be outs, or on pop-ups that he assumed would be outs, that just didn't always play. It turns out that all the other defenders weren't necessarily as sure-handed as he was. He had the fallacy that many great players have, that everybody's out there is as good as he was in the field.
I remember being shocked by the Bobby Mercer trade. It was beyond belief how shocked I was. And it just
for which side of
out.
it? Which side of it shocked you?
Getting Mercer, getting rid of it. I I just thought I thought he'd come around eventually, and that's what shocked me.
Well, it's interesting. This could be the subject of a whole different show. We're going back to the days when top line players were often traded for each other. You go back to the time period. Rocky Colavito fell into that same thing where you get
batting champion
where you
a home run champion.
Right, you get a 1-for-1 deal, and now we realize that I don't care if you're trading Hal Lanier for Babe Ruth. One guy isn't going to change a lineup. And what you have to do if you're trading away a top flight guy like that is get back 3 or 4 people who may in a year or two develop into half your lineup.
Right.
And over the years, if you look at trades now, you don't see that kind of deal out there. You don't see just to pull something completely out of a hat. Let's say a Thor for Kershaw because we want a righty and they want a lefty.
Yeah, a Pappas for Robinson or whatever, a hitter for a Cepeda for Sadecki.
Exactly. I mean, it's just those days of trading are over. The trades are much more focused on young talent and developable talent, and I'm going to circle this back to the changes in the Giants organization. Probably the biggest change that was made in the Giants organization is one we have not talked about at all, and that is bringing in David Bell to be in charge of player development, replacing Shane Turner, who's had that job in the Giants organization in one flavor or another, as a minor league manager or as the developer, as the vice president of development for a long time. And the simple reality is, you look at it, people shake their heads and say, why can't the Giants develop any outfielders? Well, I don't know what the answer to that is, but the obvious first answer to that is because they're doing it wrong. Because the other 29 teams are developing outfielders, so we know it's not impossible. And, if everybody else is able to do it and you're not, at some point you have to look at what you're doing.
So is it? It always comes down to, is it scouting or development?
It's development. It's development because Duvall. They scouted right, they selected right, they semi-developed right. They saw him as a third baseman and not as an outfielder. They didn't think that he had the mobility to be an outfielder, and he turns out to be a pretty decent outfielder. He's an above-average defender. And a 40 home run guy in Cincinnati, which means he would have been a 25 home run guy in San Francisco. And while that ain't great shakes, it would have led the team by about 8 home runs this year.
Sadly enough.
And gee, what position is he playing? Left field. And where's the black hole been for the, every team seems to have one. For the Dodgers, it was third base for about 45 years. I think they had something like 63 third basemen in 45 years.
Right.
And that
was
counted,
position
and
players
that counted
and pitchers.
Yeah. other than that, Mrs. Lincoln.
Other than that, they had a good announcing staff.
The ticket takers are some of the nicest people I've ever met. The Dodgers went through that third base hole, and you have to remember that they had Ron Cey for 10 years in the middle of that stretch.
Right.
And they still went through something like 60 third basemen in 45 years.
Yeah.
For the Giants, it's left
Mullen
field.
and all those guys, they were Andy Carey. They got. I remember back in the day.
Bill Grabarkowitz.
Bill Grabby. Yeah.
Billy Sudeikis.
They were bringing up Rookie of the Years. The Dodgers were bringing up, 4 or 5 in a row.
Well, and what you had there, the two greatest PR machines in baseball were the Yankees front office and the Dodgers front office. The Dodgers managed to get their people elected Rookie of the Year every year, and most of them disappeared. One of the rare guys who hung on to play for an extended period of time was Ted Sizemore, but he made all his bones in St. Louis. And then you had the Yankees, who convinced everybody that they had nothing but Rookies of the Year in their farm system and got good players in exchange for their top prospects who never panned out.
Right.
In some ways, back in the 60s and 70s, your PR staff was more important than your scouting staff.
Very interesting. Yeah, because they could set the tone for what other general managers think about, think about the players.
Yeah. Well, and you have to remember, there was no MLB.TV, there was no extra innings. You couldn't watch everybody all the time. Now,
right,
you can actually go online and watch every AAA game and a lot of AA games online. You may not have 8 cameras doing ISO work, but you got something on there, a video, and you can, you don't have to travel across country to cross-check a guy, and you don't have to keep an eye on somebody as they come up through a system that you wish you had drafted. You can just kind of dial them up on the internet and find them. Times have changed.
I didn't ask you the question that I wanted to about the Giants coaching staff being fired. Do you think they're trying to force Bochy out?
I don't, but I do think that they're trying to that they are making it uncomfortable for him.
Okay.
If they wanted him out, I don't think this ownership group is so averse to spending money that they would feel bad about eating 2 years of his contract.
Oh, it's not the money; it's the PR. How do you fire a guy that leads you to 3 championships?
How do you fire a guy that leads you to 3 championships and has 3 heart procedures and comes back to work 2 days later after each?
And wants to, maybe for his own good, him not being there would serve better. And yeah, maybe they're concerned about that. That could have.
Well,
then why, if that's the case, why fire Wotus, who pretty much you would think would be the heir apparent if, God forbid, something happened to Bochy along.
Well, I don't know. Again, they haven't fired any of these people. They're all still in the organization.
But they reassigned, in other words.
They're reassigned.
So there'll be Rover. Henley Mullins will be a Rover, which is a very valued and terrific job.
Hensley Mullins speaks 6 languages. Hensley Mullins could become the head of scouting in the Caribbean. The Giants have not done a great job of scouting in the Caribbean, even though they have a team in the Dominican Developmental League. There's opportunity there. Wotus could become a roving minor league instructor to help develop these. Remember, development is going to be the issue here. And sometimes what you have to do, sometimes what looks like a bloodbath at one level actually turns out to be a bloodbath at another level. It may be at the minor league level that you're going to see guys being let go, and you may see Mullins becoming a system-wide hitting instructor. And then the issue here may not be that they don't like what people were teaching at the major league level. The issue may be that they need to get this organization-wide, that they realize that there are other organizations that are doing a better job of sending the same message at every level.
Right. Which brings us to the question of the major league coaches make the bigger bucks than the minor league coaches. Who's the most valuable minor league coach or manager? I think it's the guy at the low A league, at the development, Salem or wherever they are now in the Northwest League, who's bringing guys in, setting the tone for how they're going to carry themselves and work out and approach the game. Those guys don't make anywhere near as much bucks as the major league coaches, and and that's where I met Wotus years ago. He was up in Everett managing the short A league that college kids and high school kids would come into pro ball in, and I think that's a tremendous. That's a job that's highly underrated.
I agree with you that it's a highly underrated job. And one of the issues here is, what kind of organization do you have? Do you have an organization that demands winning at every level, which is kind of the way the A's develop their players? They try to win every league that they play in. They try to finish in a playoff spot. Or do you take the Giants approach, which is winning isn't as important as developing the players?
Right. And then you have to get a guy like Wotus. Is he going to go back and ride buses in the low minors again, or that kind of thing? So
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how all this is going to shake out. Of course, now there's an embargo because the World Series is on. I was hoping to see them, with a new pitching coach by before the World Series was started. But that didn't happen. There's some guys that are out there. There's some guys that are available that are awfully good at what they've done. Dave Island has already interviewed with them. I don't know if Mike Maddox has come in to interview with them or not. I understand Frank Viola is going to probably come in and interview with them. And there may be some other people out there too. But, it's interesting. All I can tell you, and I shouldn't even tell you this probably, but I can tell you that my wife works for the team, and she said there were a lot of people coming in for interviews the last couple of days. That's all I know. She doesn't recognize people. She doesn't know who's who. She's not in baseball operations. And even if I named names, I don't think she would know who people were. But, they are being active. They're being proactive at this point, I can tell you that. But beyond that, I don't know who's out there. But I would certainly, I would want a shot at Mike Maddox, at least. And it's really interesting that they were linked with Chili Davis a week and a half ago, and nothing's happened. Nothing's happened with Chili where he is. Nothing's happened with Chili here. Nothing's happened with anybody else as a hitting instructor, and nobody else has been mentioned as a hitting instructor. So, it's kind of,
maybe it comes down to after the World Series type thing, as you say.
Yeah, I'm sure it does, and I'm sure that they are trying right now to get a jump on other teams and figure out, who they want and go out and try and entice them in. That's the interesting thing, if you've got a whole major league coaching staff that you've reassigned internally and basically created new positions for,
right.
And then you have to go out and get new guys. You may have to go out and overpay those new guys to change organizations. So it's clearly not money that's the issue here. It's clearly that they're looking for a different philosophy, that they're looking for some new blood who is more analytically oriented. And we'll just see how that goes.
Yeah. Hey, listen, next week we'll talk about tabletop games. This, I couldn't interrupt this terrific, informative interview with you. This was great. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Well, you're most welcome. Next week we will. I can't get very deep into the APA versus Stratomatic debate because I never played Stratomatic.
Here's what I'd like to know. Here's what I'd like to know. First, we'll give everybody a little teaser. The other day, you had a throwaway line. We were talking about Kent and how when he came over here, your exact words were, defensively, he was a 6 in APA. Well, I knew what you were talking about, of course. It's the player ratings on the cards that these games have. Who does the player ratings on these cards? And in your experience in playing these games, are they always accurate?
Well, there was a time when I knew exactly who did the player ratings for APA because I was the commissioner of the longest-standing national APA play-by-mail league. But that organization has undergone a lot of turnover and change.
I didn't mean the guy's name in particular. I meant in general. Do they hire scouts? Do they? Is it just? What's their procedure in determining the ratings?
I think their procedure in determining the ratings was relatively simple. First of all, you have to remember that fielding contributes to overall and individual ERAs. And so there was a push-pull in designing pitchers' cards and defenders. Second of all, you had to look at issues like how many double plays did a team turn. If a team led the league in double plays, generally speaking, that means their pitchers put a lot of people on base. So if they had reasonably good pitching also, then you had to upgrade the fielders in order to increase the likelihood that ground balls became double plays. I think they looked at how many errors. Unfortunately, I think they designed a lot of it based around how many errors the guy committed. I mean, I remember, I go back far enough to remember when Leo Cardenas set the record for the fewest errors by a shortstop with, I think, 10 or 11 in a season. And, at the time I thought that was pretty amazing. And then 5 or 6 years later, I had grown up enough to look at the numbers and realize that he also had the fewest number of chances accepted by a Gold Glove shortstop in history. It wasn't that he made a few errors, it was that he only got to a few balls. And made a few errors.
He wasn't extending himself and taking that.
And so we didn't have range factor in those days, and we certainly didn't have StatCast in those days. So it was a little of this and a little of that. At least in APA, you had to take a whole bunch of things into account. And when they came out with a master game and started adding in arm strength and the ability to throw guys out on the bases. And you added arm strength for your middle infielders on cutoffs for those plays, then I think the game got a whole lot more accurate. And I think that they were able to fine-tune their defensive ratings at that point a good deal more.
Did you start out with All-Star Baseball, spinning the thing with the discs?
The great Ethan Allen Tyko Ellis All-Star Baseball.
Yes.
No, I did not. I started earlier than that. And you're going to have to go to the web. You're going to have to go to the web to look this one up, my friend.
All right.
I started with the centennial edition of Willie Mays Say Hey Baseball.
Whoa. I've never heard of that one.
Which came in a box that suggested that the field was perfectly square because the field was printed on the bottom of the box. And the box had this cute little feature. It had what looked like a little awning sitting out in the center field corner which I guess was supposed to replicate the clubhouse at the Polo Grounds, although none of the rest of the box looked anything like the Polo Grounds.
Could have it been the awning on the bullpen in the Polo Grounds?
I don't know. It was dead center field. I mean, it was just
okay.
because of the way the box was constructed. The box was square.
Right.
And all of the dice results were printed in the lid. You had one red die and one green dice, and so the way they came up, that gave you 36 combinations, which is pretty much how Apple wound up doing it too. But there were no cards; it was just 36 outcomes, and they varied depending on the base situation. How many guys were on base, but there was that, and there was
stats come into play.
Not a bit. Not the tiniest bit.
That was much like the Ethan Allen game.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then there was another game that I played, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. I just remember that on the pitcher's mound, it was another game where everything happened inside the box of the game, the base of the game. And there was a field printed, and then there were cutouts at various spots on the field. And there was a wheel underneath the field that was printed, just loaded with plays and outcomes. And you would grab kind of a cup on the pitcher's mound and spin it, and it spun the wheel under the board. And when it came up, it would come up with either an outcome at home plate, which was a walk or a strikeout, or it would come up with an outcome at some one of the bases, so that you would see a looping fly ball to center field or a line drive to left field or whatever, and outcomes were based on those things. It would say it was an out, or it would say D7 line drive, which was a double to left field. And for the life of me, I can't remember what that game was called or find it on the internet. I have been able to find the Centennial Edition Willie Mays game.
Did you ever play a game, any of the Sports Illustrated games?
Yes. Yes, somewhere
in
my storage shed, I still have the Sports Illustrated golf game.
Okay.
And I may have the baseball game also. I'm not sure, but the golf game was spectacular.
Good. I have a feeling that you were very good with keeping the stats and transferring them to a book. I could see you playing right now, and so you'd have a running total of who was doing what. Am I correct?
The greatest discovery I ever made was wandering through a college bookstore. I found a spiral-bound notebook where the margin, the left-hand margin, was 2.5 inches wide. Okay, instead of just that 1/4 inch before you get to the spiral. That left me enough room that I could set up an entire replay season in the notebook and lay out pitching rotations in the left-hand margin so that I could play the games. And then my notations were, I had room, I left 3 blank lines below each set of each game set so that I could do a line score and then track home runs and stolen bases for teams on the lines below and have a blank line in between.
Okay. Out of that comes being an official scorer for Major League Baseball. Had to start somewhere. Right? Led directly to it. I mean, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're there. And you could do it with, again, the whole thing comes down to concentration as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, it was never a problem. As long as I got my homework done, I could go off and do that seemingly well into the night. And I used to do that. I get my homework done by 7:30 to 8 o'clock and sit there and, grind out 2 or 3 days of the schedule.
Beautiful. Good memories. Thank you, sir, for a terrific interview. We'll elaborate on this next week and other things, because anything we start talking about, it always leads to other things. And that's the wonderful part about ball, and having these memories, having the ability to remember, as we both seem to have. Because I still can't find my...
For a while yet. We'll see how long.
Right. No, time is relative, let's put it that way. Sometimes it seems like it is a long time we're given on this earth. It doesn't go all that fast sometimes. But
Right. And the one thing that we can always be sure of is that whatever topic we pick will be off it in moments.
Right. Do you remember how fast our childhood went? That's right. We go from here to there, by the way. That's nice. We entertain each other. We make each other smile, and that makes for a good show.
Yep.
Have a great one, Michael. Stay healthy and well, and we'll talk same time, same bat channel next week.
All right. I will see you then, Ralph. Thanks again.
All right. And to those of you who listen, thank you. And if you want to do something nice, if you enjoy our broadcast, accumulate lightly used children's books, put them in a box, a big carton, take them down to the Head Start program. Make sure kids get to be well prepared for kindergarten, and so they don't fall behind. And one of the best ways to do it is get them reading really early. So if you like our show, just go out and do that. Wherever you are, there's a Head Start program, whatever town you're living in. And fill those kids' libraries up with books. Be well, everybody. And we'll be back next week.
Let me throw in a shameless plug while we're at it there, if you don't mind.
Please.
If you're a little older than Head Start, go out and buy the baseball codes and read it. First of all, I'm still donating $2.50 for all my sales of books, which is far more than I actually get from the book, for all sales of the book in October and November to the Napa-Sonoma Fire Relief. Second of all, there's a great Dick Tidrow story in the book. Oh, my goodness.
Well, as we spoke, I looked on he's still with us. He's only a few months younger than I am, as a matter of fact, Dick Tidrow. So let's keep all three of us alive. Tell me about your book. We haven't talked about your book, and you co-wrote it with Mr. Waldo, am I correct?
I co-wrote it with Jason Turbo. And
Turbo, I'm sorry.
That is perfectly okay, and it is essentially, I've been sitting in press boxes for years wondering why nobody had ever taken the time to write a book to explain the unwritten rules. You'd hear over and over again on a broadcast, well, boy, we got to keep an eye on that for the rest of the game. He just broke one of there's a ground ball to third, and we'll be back after these words. And time again, you'd hear them referred to, but you'd never hear them actually laid out and explained. And so I said, let's just do it. And it turned out that the unwritten rules fit on one sheet of paper if you are succinct at explaining them. So what we wound up with was it turned out to be this magnificent pegboard from which we could hang stories. And we found stories. We interviewed over 200 past, present, Major League umpires, scouts, general managers, players, coaches, writers, Hall of Fame writers, I mean, you name it, we interviewed them, and broadcasters, and we got some great stories. We contracted a book for 60,000 words and turned in 245,000 words.
Whoa.
which they generously cut to about 110. It's just there's a whole lot of stories in there, but I will just tell you that the Dick Tidrow story involves explaining the importance of being a superstar and the importance of remembering to pull the sheets up after you've rappelled up into your hotel room after curfew.
Would you tell me, based on what you just told me about the editing process, what's the one story in the book that you're the most sorry that was left out?
Oh God, I couldn't even begin to do that.
Okay.
I really couldn't. I got to be honest with you, Ralph. It's been 8-9 years since we went through the editing process, and I would have to go back and look at the original manuscript now to be able to do that for you, because I am so used to what's there that it's hard for me to remember what's not there.
Was it an arduous process, the editing process for you guys?
I'm sure it was an arduous process for our editor.
Were you consulted on the editing?
Oh yeah, Jason and I. What happened is that I did a large proportion of the interviews and transcribed virtually all of them. Jason did a lot of the writing, and he interfaced directly with the editor. But what happened is, as everything was written, I did the first edits. Everything that he wrote, I went through and I did what you would call a line edit. I checked for grammar, for verb tenses, for agreement, for sentence structure. I checked for accuracy. I checked for facts. And then when we were comfortable that what we had written was technically correct, we sent that off to the editor, and he would come back and say, this section needs improving, this is weak, we don't need this in here, explain this a little further, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. We'll be back next week, sir. We'll pursue it more.
Can't wait.
I look forward to it. You stay healthy this week.
All right, I will do that.
Promise?
Promise.
All right. We'll see you next week.
All right, bye-bye.
Be well, everybody.